What? Yeah. No, thanks to this music. So tonight we pray for what we know can be, and every day we hope for what we still can't see. It's up to us to be the change, and even though we all can still do more, there's so much to be thankful for. Look beyond ourselves, there's so much sorrow. It's way too late to say I'll cry tomorrow. Each of us must find our truth. So for tonight we pray for what we know can be, and every day we hope for what we still can't see. It's up to us to be the change, and even though we all can still do more, and still do more. Thankful for, even with our differences, there is a place we're all connected. Each of us can find each other's light. There's so much to be thankful for. There's so much to be thankful for. And on this day, what we know can be, and on this day we hope for what we know can be, and on this day we hope for. New? It's very nice, though.
Everything looks nice. These might even be big, especially because look at the back. It seems stupid problem.
No,
No?
it's not bad. Well, no, better than that. But looks fun on here.
You want to twist? Okay.
Okay, let's see the fish come on. Sarah, hello. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I am logged in as Brit Shalom.
It doesn't matter. I'll change your name.
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Or you,
I'll do it quickly. Don't worry.
okay. Well, it's because I was Gazumba yesterday
Okay, that's
and I
okay.
didn't log in.
I don't care. It's
Oh,
fine.
well.
Here you are.
There I am. I'm like, is he gonna let
You're
me
on ours
in?
now.
Is he gonna let me in? Oh, make me the host though, so I can share my screen.
Okay, 1 second.
Hope I didn't scare too many people away.
No. No, go. Now you're the co-host.
Okay. I was about to look for your phone number. I hope my cat doesn't help me.
But it'd be educational.
Oh yeah, she's been knocking books off, sitting on them,
Yeah.
just being she even managed to jump up on the desk, slide
Mhm.
off the iPad and knock a full Coke Zero into my lap yesterday. That was pretty.
Oh, look, Suzanne's here, but she's not. But she's absent from her room. Huh. Suzanne, where are you? Oh, she's connecting to audio.
And I don't see her. Oh, there she
No,
is.
I
Yeah.
don't see her. She's doing something.
Oh.
Well, Lisa's here, except Lisa, I can't.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Lisa. Are we going to see you?
I'm sorry, did you say something to me, Martin?
Yeah, we don't see your video yet.
Steve apparently is coming. I sent him the link and the password.
Yep.
Sarah, I may have to leave early, but it's nothing about your presentation.
That's quite all right. I hope I don't leave early. Why is Suzanne doing it twice?
Aha. Suzanne, you're in two places.
Yes, I know, and it's a computer issue. Let me go turn off the other one, but I may need to turn it on again.
Lisa, thank you for taking care of that book. I'm going to use it next time very heavily, I think. That will make
Quite all right. I'm sure that Mary Lowry, she's the head honcho of Friends of Fondren Library. I'm sure she's not happy that she knows me by name and phone number, but she takes care of everything for me.
How do we, where would I park to return it?
The problem is there's no close in place to park. There is a garage at the business school, which of course wasn't there when I was there, so probably not when you were there either. Anyway, it's about a 10-minute walk to the library.
I can do that. Thank God I can walk, but it's, I just didn't, okay. So is it near the orange?
You're talking about Rice, Sarah?
Yeah.
There are a bunch of parking garages on campus, but they're expensive as hell.
No,
Yes, they are.
I won't be in it long.
No, but even to be in it a short amount of time, it's not cheap. So what Mary does for me, since I can't walk that far, is that I pull up on a nearby street and put my flashers on, and she or someone who works in her area comes out and either brings me things or picks up things.
That's sweet. It's funny because, believe it or not, I learned how to drive stick shift in the stadium parking lot.
Oh, wow.
Now, very different than it was back then.
Yes, yes.
All open.
I don't know that you can even, if there's enough open space to do that anymore.
I don't think so. I don't
No.
think so.
Very nice. Very nice. But I can't do this well on here.
What was very bad was in 1978, I took a graduate seminar there, or maybe, no, it was 80. I was pregnant first guy. And the guy next to me introduced himself as a senior from Jones, and my jaw dropped open. And he said, how long have you been out? I thought, I feel really old, and it's only been a few years.
Well, I seem to remember, although it was not in my case, that there were some men who we really sort of accepted as men who lived in Jones, not officially, but all the time.
Yeah, I was at Sid Rich a lot. But the thing is that since I lived in Brown, when I went to Jones, I had to sign in and out.
Oh, yeah.
Even as a woman. And I remember doing, what's his name? Steve, the guy who did all the games, Steve Jackson. And they had some sort of party there, and we played Chinese fire drill and signed in, ran around the building and signed out, ran around the building, signed back in, and we,
Oh, no.
Stupid things you do at Rice, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, and I can't remember what they called it. What was it, on the first weekend of the month or the first day when people would strip naked and, streaking. Yeah. They would put shaving cream all over their bodies and just run around campus.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. I didn't participate.
No, I did not either.
Hi, Rhoda.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Hi, Rhoda.
Hello.
Hi, Rhoda. I think I saw more of you yesterday.
Yeah. You saw, as you said, you saw all three dimensions of me. Yes.
All three dimensions, yeah.
You
And then I
passed in the
also ran
parking
into
lot.
Debbie Michelle, but didn't recognize her. See what happens when you don't see people? I've seen you and your hair is distinctive, but she said hello to me and it's like, who are you? And she said,
Yeah, the first time I actually saw Kenner Levine in person, we met him for Tashlik over in the Bayou, and I didn't recognize him at first. I had to take a double look.
There's Etta. Now wait for Debbie to get in. We'll give her a minute.
Steve indicated he was going to be here.
There's Sue Resnick.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. What's going on?
Not much.
Same old pandemic kind of thing.
Good morning.
Going out a bit more at least, feeling a little more comfortable.
I went to my sister's wedding in Florida. We drove though.
Oh,
Oh,
The
nice.
pictures were very nice, Sarah.
Yeah, I didn't post very many because I only took that one. Since he's a photographer, he had friends shooting the wedding.
ah,
But his name is Goldschlag, so Rabbi had me pouring Goldschlager and champagne mixes after the wedding.
Boy,
They didn't do well in my body. It tasted very nice, but he's decided that should be his family drink.
What airline, Sarah? What
I
airline?
drove.
Oh, you drove. Okay.
Isaac and Peter and I drove, and they let me drive a couple of hours.
how long did it take you?
Straight shot.
I think it's about 16 hours.
yeah.
It was a little longer coming home because we were a little leery of the toll roads since Easy Pass doesn't count. Easy something else did. And so we headed up north on I-95, which slowed everything down. It was in Cocoa Beach.
I-95, my home.
Yeah,
um,
everybody
I
lives.
mean, literally, I grew up along 95, as did Rhoda.
So did I.
We know, yeah, you did too. But Rhoda and I grew up along the same sort of,
Farther north.
yeah.
Much
I,
further north. I was in
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale, but
Yeah.
Me too.
yeah, it wasn't too bad between Cocoa Beach and 10, but still long.
someday I'm going to take a picture of the intersection of 10 and 95, since so much of my life, is on the
Intersected.
two of them. Well, Gail also spent part of her childhood along the more northerly in Rhode Island and everything. But, when I first moved here, and I told people that when I drove between New York and Boston, it was 3 or 4 states, depending. They kind of went, "You've got to be kidding." But it was. Hi, Jeff.
We'll give him another 1 minute and then we'll start.
Hi, Deborah.
Good, because I have no idea how long this takes. It might
Hi,
have to go
Suzanne.
fast. I don't know.
Hi.
Oh, come on. You're doing an excellent job.
Yeah, but
Martin and Debbie, have you been up to New Haven yet?
Nope,
No.
probably June.
June.
Say hello to me. Are you driving, Martin?
No, we can't drive. It's 3 days to drive. It's too
Yeah,
far.
I know. I have a feeling I would like to go this summer, but I think I'm probably not going to get to go anywhere until the fall. But I want to go up north because I want to see leaves in color.
Go to East Texas.
And the last time I was up there in the fall, which was like 3 years ago or something, I get off the plane in Boston and there's no color. And it's like, where am I?
Did you
Okay,
take the wrong
we
plane?
We're at 1:02, so maybe we should start.
okay,
Okay, everybody on mute?
I'm not.
Okay.
The small crowds, okay.
Here and there. Okay, we're going to talk about the Karaganiza again. Only this time we're going to look at insights that it's given us into Judaism, our history, our liturgy. What was that? Okay. And okay, oops. Let me get back there. This time period is really important, the information that we've gotten here, because we really did not have much documentation between 135 CE, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and when printing was more widely used. So this has really been very helpful. One thing that we've been able to look at is Scribal Improvements. So there were that they've looked at through different fragments. There were technical improvements made in Bible production, adoption of the codex form, which is a sewn book, improvement in preparing skins, better quality vellum, and the books. The books were more ornate, not to the level of Christian books, but they do use micrography. And there were also libraries, public, private, and Bibles purchased for children, because they're colophons, people have dedicated them. And here's a couple of examples. I thought it's always useful to show pictures of what a fragment looks like with micrography on the bottom, at the way it was decorated. And one that I think is particularly beautiful. Here's the front of it and the reverse of it. The other thing we've learned from this has been vocalizations, because it took a while for the Tiberian system that we use right now, which where we see the vowels under the letters, to be developed and codified. It was actually not codified until maybe 1524, when a Bible was published by Daniel Bomberg in Venice, but other versions were seen until the 16th century. And what we found here, there was a scholar by the name of Paul Kahl, who was a German, and he dedicated his studies to finding the different systems, and how the Geniza fragments provided insight into how we might have indicated vowels in Hebrew and how these things may have been pronounced. And so he found three main groups. There was superlinear Palestinian notation, which is the vowels on the top of the letters, sublinear Tiberian, which you guys are very familiar with, and the superlinear Babylonian, which this is an example of. You can see the marks on the top. And this is actually Hebrew Aramaic interlinear Devarim with Babylonian vocalization. And we think that the Yemeni system may have been a descendant from the Babylonian system. And then there was the Damascus Document. In 1900, Schechter found two related texts, A and B. A is a lot older and had more scribal errors. B seemed to be based on A, but it had its own errors, and it was full of Levitical laws, Sabbath laws, dietary laws, how to relate to non-Jews, organization, biblical and rabbinic history. And it turned out, okay, it is, that Schechter decided, he thought it might be a Karaite document, and he actually called it a Zadokite document. And it's become known as the Damascus Document, and I've seen it referred to as CD. I don't know what that stands for. And he thought it might be an extinct Jewish sect with a charismatic leader, because it had reference to the teacher of righteousness, the only one, the only teacher, the lawgiver who interprets the law, and that the teacher will die and return as the Messiah. And here the Messiah is going to be a descendant of Zadok, the high priest of 10 BCE, and not David. And their group broke away from the Jews, and in this document moved to Damascus when their leader died. And their community was divided into priests, Levites, Israelites, and converts. The high priest and the censor, who was the judge and tax collector, and a membership director. And it seemed to be Jews, but they adopted many books that weren't in the Bible. They had a very unusual festival calendar, and they're very anti-Pharisee. So, and then there was a Karaite sage in the 10th century named Jacob Kirkisani, and he described the high priest Zadok as his hero. And his followers were called Zadokites, and they were also anti-Pharisee. So that's why Schechter thought it might be a Karaite document. But then in 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in Qumran. And they found that these were actually a reliable copy of the works found in Qumran. Because apparently in 800, the Karaites went to Jericho, because Damascus here wasn't really Syria, it was really referring to the boonies. And so they think that they were referring to Jericho. And the Karaites in 800 copied all the texts. They had affinity to the scenes because they were also anti-Pharisee, anti-rabbinic. And here's what one of the pages of the Damascus document looked like. Very well preserved. Apparently when Schechter first started looking at the documents, and the ones that he first took, he focused on anything that was actually handwritten because he thought that they would be more valuable. And we have found value in all the documents found, though. And another thing that they found some of are palimpsests, because apparently the people were recyclers. And it's from the Greek, again, and to rub. And what they would do is they would take a papyrus, or a vellum, and they would rub off the letters that were on it to have it clear enough that they could write something new on it. And this showed up very early in their studies, and Schechter's associate Burkett studied the Greek that was under it. And it turned out to be, it had Paleo-Hebrew characters for the Tetragrammaton. The pronunciation of this word was evidently kurios because of an abbreviation that they saw somewhere where they ran out of room. And it is the Bible translated by Aquila. And Aquila was a Greek who converted to Judaism and was married into Hadrian's family. And the Talmud states that he was a disciple of Rabbi Akiva. This translation was widely used by Greek-speaking Jews. It and the Septuagint were the only ones allowed by the lawgivers at that point. And apparently it was also very, very literal, very true to the text. So it's a little hard to read. And, but nobody really looked at the top. Schechter thought it might be a piyut by Kalir, but nobody looked at it at first. And then Israel Davidson came around. He worked at JTS. He was a very interesting character. Apparently he was born into an Eastern European family, and his parents had lost 12 children before he was born. So they named him, but they didn't tell him his name because they didn't want to jinx anything. And they thought they would tell him his name when he became an adult. And they called him Alter for old one, or Chaim for life. But unfortunately they died before he became an adult, and he was raised by his relatives. But when the Tsar's army came for him, he made his way to New York. Anyhow, he was working at the JTS, and he studied some of the fragments that Schechter had brought back. And the one thing that he found was a couple of pages in Judeo-Arabic that had instructions for prayer service. And it had the first words of Piyut written by Yane. Yane was unknown in modern times. We had no reference to anything he did, but he was mentioned in the works of Sadia Gaon. And in 1133 to 1196 or so, Ephraim Aban reported that Yane wasn't recited because he murdered his student Eliezer Kalir out of writer's envy, and he placed a scorpion in his sandal. But then Ban also said this may not have happened. Please don't harm me if it didn't. And the document indicated that the rest of the text, since it only had the first words, could be found in Moxor Yani. So Davidson was very systematic, and he worked his way through all the documents he could. And he went to Britain to see the documents in person, but he at first couldn't find anything. And then for some reason, years later, he was inspired to look back at the Aquila palimpsests. And Burkett had published some, and Taylor had also published more of his work. And Schechter had been quite poetic about the ancient Piyutim, and he thought the palimpsests might have something of Kalir's in it, but he never looked further, and he didn't direct Davidson to do it. But there on top of Aquila's translation was a Piyut written by Yane. He researched it further and he identified 40 works by Yane. 9 years later, he published it in a document in 1910. And apparently the Aquila had 4 kivorot, which were poems, written by Yane on Leviticus 13, 14, 21, and 22. And they can be joined with other leaves in the Geniza to make a complete choir. And then Menachem Zule, working for Shokin, studied more of his work, and he systematically combed through all the fragments. And so as the Jewish world was collapsing, he found 800 poems by Yane. And he published it in a book called Piyutei Yani, and it was the last Hebrew volume published in Nazi Germany in 1938. And luckily, Zuleg was able to continue his work in Israel with Shokin. And these are the features. Oh, okay. The features of Yane's work followed the Palestinian triennial readings. They were shorter readings that led to greater embellished liturgical poetry. And this cycle on these piyut fell out of use by about the 9th to 11th century in Palestine and about the 13th in Fustat. Yane's name was spelled like it would be in Palestine, Yud Nun Yud Yud, as opposed to Yud Nun Aleph Yud. So they believe he was Palestinian. There was no reference to Islam or in the Holy Land, so it was probably before the 7th century. And not the 10th century in Italy, which was what we had thought before the Geniza work was done. And he uses midrash from the late 5th century and assumes a flexible but core liturgy, a liturgy that was established in the Byzantine era. So the poet has been dated to mid to late 6th century to early 7th century CE. And the features of Yane's poetry is an acrostic from Aleph to Lamed, so forth. It leads into the first verse to be read in the Torah, even if the verse is about pus. And part 3 has the poet's signature and acrostic, which is an allusion to the week's Haftorah. And it's the earliest evidence for a full end rhyme in Hebrew. And the form is called karova, which means to draw near. And the piyut was used to bring the worshiper to a closer to sublime prayer. And it was used to embellish or replace the Amidah, because apparently in some parts, the Greek government and other governments had prohibited reciting Amidah. And it was multi-part. It starts exegetical, I did not pronounce that correctly. even if the parsha is about pus, it starts with the parsha, and it becomes a stirring lyric. And the 7th unit is called the runner of the rabbit, and that employs speed and density of ornament to draw in the listener. And I thought this was kind of fun. Gail, would you read it? This is a translation of one of Yane's piyut, and you can see the type of verbiage he used.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, please.
Oh. And the angel of the Lord was revealed to him in the heart of the flame. Angel of fire, devouring fire. Fire blazing through damp and dryer. Fire candescent in smoke and snow. Fire drawn like a crouching lion. Fire evolving through shade after shade. Fateful fire that will not expire. Gleaming fire that wanders far. Hissing fire that sends up sparks, fire infusing a swirling gale, fire that jolts to life without fuel, fire that's kindled and kindles daily, lambent fire, unfanned by fire, miraculous fire flashing through fronds, notions of fire like lightning on high, omens of fire in the chariot's wind, pillars of fire in thunder and storm, quarries of fire wrapped in a fog, raging fire that reaches Sheol, terrible fire that ushers in cold, fire's vortex like a wilderness crow, fire extending and yet like a rainbow's zone of color arching through sky.
And the people who translated this, Adina Hoffman and Peter Cole in Sacred Truth, wrote that sometimes what the poet is being said is less important than the intensity and wizardry of the words. So you can see A to Z of fire. And here's what the previous translation looks like. And there was also heretical document that was found by Schechter in the Geniza documents, and it was one that actually attacked the Bible, not the interpretation of the Bible, which is pretty unusual. Usually you'd attack the Talmud or the rabbi's interpretation, but not the Bible itself. That's considered untouchable. And this heretic said the style wasn't clear, there was inconsistent phrasing, Needless details and repetitions, chronological difficulties, contradictions, and an ethics not compatible with a moral God. Sounds pretty modern, but actually he was from the 9th century, and the guy's name was Chiwi al-Balkhi. And pardon?
A comment on this. You say this is 9th century and we think of this as modern, but the truth of the matter is, I think, is that there were Jews who criticized the Bible and had concerns about these things and had different concepts of what the Bible meant, going back way earlier than our time, that rabbis wrote about and so forth. And this notion that somehow just these modern Jews question certain things is just not true.
Well, obviously. I mean, you know, at that point they had the Karaites that argued with the rabbis, but this was something that actually documents somebody actually arguing with the Bible itself.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Rona's called me. She can't get in. She said the password's not working.
She's in.
Okay, now, okay, that's from Chiwi al-Balkhi. But then when Davidson did go to Britain, he did find Saja's response to Chiwi, which was written about 60 years after Chiwi. It was rhymed prose, 73 stanzas of 4 rhymes, alphabetic and signature acrostic, and it was a non-liturgical use of Hebrew. And actually, it seems to be written in the same style as Chiwi wrote it. Oh, this is so cool. Cat on table, sorry. Okay. And before the study of the Geniza, there was very little available in terms of rabbinic literature, as I said, between Bar Kokhba and medieval times. But 15% of the Geniza material is apparently rabbinic literature. And most of the fragments are actually 3 to 4 centuries older than the oldest Talmud manuscript that we had until then, which was known in Munich in 1334. And so these are much closer to the source, closer in distance and in time. And there are also different glosses and commentaries that make the meanings clear. There's a different Aramaic used in the West in Palestine versus in the East in Babylon that we've learned about. Some of the Mishnah has cantillation marks, so possibly it was chanted. And it's showing us the development of rabbinic Hebrew as opposed to biblical Hebrew. And so we've actually recovered many commentaries and responsive from the Geonic period and after. And this particular document was very important. It was found by Mark Bregman in 1983 in the additional series at the Taylor Schechter Collection. And what the additional series is, they had put aside anything that they thought was too small or hard to read that they didn't want to look at. And he was looking at something particular. And when he found this, he got excited because it had stitching on it that showed that it had been in a scroll. And it was very dark, almost impossible to read because it was a leather that was older than the newer processes where leather was treated or to not let it darken like this. And he did notice the word Rabbi Meir on it. So he knew it was post-biblical, that it was rabbinic. So he got very excited about it. And it turned out that the photocopy that the librarian sent him in Cambridge cleaned up the image enough so it could be read. And he discovered that this was actually part of Avot de Rabbi Natan, a commentary on Pirkei Avot. And it's the oldest rabbinic manuscript anywhere, and it's possibly 4th or 5th century. And they were interested that it was actually in a scroll, not a codex, because at that point they thought only the holy books would be in a codex and anything rabbinic would be in a book. So this was a very, very important find. We've also learned a lot about liturgy because the liturgy was varied and not standardized. And there were new blessings found. Some were introduced and others eliminated. There, for instance, part of the Mishnah Shabbat and 3 sets that was chanted on Shabbat, and we don't do that anymore. There were 3 sets of Passover Seder, hand washings at the Seder, which were eliminated. There were insertions in the Kaddish, extra preliminary invocations, broader use of Psalms and verses. Frequently, they would add the 10 Commandments, reciting that and the Song of the Sea, which we still recite. And it sometimes had mystical and messianic inclusions. It's also given us a better idea of what was done in Palestine before the Christian Crusaders destroyed the communities there. I thought this was pretty interesting. This is a verse that was found in a 12th century Siddur for the Muslim Imam. Rhoda, would you read it?
Okay. For Imam Al-Amir Biacham Allah, as we pray for the life of our distinguished sovereign Lord and Muslim leader, commander of the faithful, and for the royal princes and for the royal family, and for those who devotedly assist the king and do battle for him against his foes. May Almighty God come to their assistance and to ours, subdue those who arise against us and against them, and inspire them to deal kindly with us and with all his people, the house of Israel, and let us say Amen.
It reminded me quite a bit of our current prayer for our country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was rather interesting. So we've learned a lot about Jewish practice from this. There's also some Haggadot. This one is fairly complete, which is unusual. And it's in Judaic Arabic, and it shows some differences between our current traditions and what was used back then. There are blessings for washing the hand that are different. We say al netilat yadayim, and they wrote it instead as al rechitsat yadayim. So what is the difference in meaning? Guys know?
I think the difference, when you say lirchot, you really mean to wash in the sense of cleaning physically, at least in modern Hebrew, whereas netilat yadayim is more of a ritual thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like raising up. Like we also say al nitilat lulav when we pick up the lulav before we shake it.
Right.
So it's to take up or to lift up is what it means. Like a surgeon, you know, after they wash.
That makes sense.
You can't tell from this way, in modern Hebrew, clearly lirchot or rechitza has to do with going and taking a shower and that sort of stuff.
So, yeah. Some of the Haggadot that we found only have 3 questions, not 4. And rather than in every generation, each Jew must feel as if he himself went out of Egypt, they would have in every generation, each Jew must feel as if he himself is going out of Egypt. And based on the writing style of this particular Haggadah, it's dated to the 10th or first half of the 11th century. And it makes it one of the earliest known Hebrew manuscripts written on paper. And it's quite possibly the oldest surviving Haggadah. And it has unskilled writing, idiosyncratic spelling, and linguistic usage. And so apparently it's a text that a layman had for his home ritual.
So when was this written, Sarah? When did they make this?
Yeah, it said about the, I wrote it down, 10th to the first half of the 11th century. So it would be the end of the 900s to the beginning of the 1000s.
Sarah, that's interesting because in Sephardic tradition where they actually reenact leaving Egypt, getting up from the table, and
yeah,
so that word change.
Yep, we've learned a lot about the history of it.
Yeah.
Plus, they're presumably possibly in Egypt at the time.
Yes, they were in Egypt, exactly.
In Fustat.
In Fustat, in Alexandria. This was the Jewish community in the Cairo suburb of Fustat, exactly. Well, what's now the Cairo suburb, which was now the main city then.
So what I find interesting about the Haggadah, the original, the Mishnah, which describes what the Haggadah was supposed to do on the Seder, the original version had 3 questions, right?
Okay, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, had 3 questions, and then they became 4, and then they became 5, and they went back to 4 again. But we're saying here that in the 10th century, we still had the 3.
Yeah. We're really learning a lot about our history and how Judaism has been shaped and changed over the years. Plus, some things were done differently because it was a Palestinian community, and which we didn't know much about. And now I'm going to be talking about some people known and unknown from Jewish history that are important. One, obviously, Saja ben Yosef al-Fayumi, otherwise known as the 10th century Gaon of the Academy of Surah. And the Geniza had hundreds of documents that illustrate his life and work. And from it, we've learned more about his life. Like, we've actually fixed his birth to 882, and we can follow his movement from Egypt to Babylon via Palestine and Syria. And we also learned about his struggle to become a leader. And so interestingly, this particular episode, in 922 to 923, before Saja became Gaon, the Jews of Babylon and the Jews of Israel followed different festival calendars, different holiday schedules, because Rabbi Aaron Ben Meir of Palestine decided that he should take over setting the calendar, because it was originally done with Palestinian approval, but Babylon, by this point, Babylon was setting the calendar. And so Sadia's efforts to take over the calendar made him sort of a Babylonian, big shot there, because he won. And he documented all of the details of this battle in Sefer HaMoadim, and we've discovered that in the Geniza. And we also have more evidence of his work, his Sidur, his Piyut, his pioneering encouragement of the use of Hebrew and learning Hebrew grammar, and his philosophy through his monographs that he wrote. And he also translated the Bible into Arabic, and he wrote many of his treatises in Judeo-Arabic so that all of the Jews in the area would be able to understand it. And there are other documents that have taught us more about the Gaonic history and internecine battles between the different Gaons and the leadership there. So we've learned a lot of history there. And here's somebody else that we can recognize, and that's Moses Ben Mayamon of Cordova, Maimonides, or the Rambam. He settled in Fustat in the 1160s, and 60 documents have been found in the Geniza that were written in his hand. They're draft copies of his commentary on the Mishnah, Mishnah Torah, Guide to the Perplexed. There's evidence of his early communal activities in Fustat. There are court documents, responsa, including one that he signed, medical advice, and personal letters to and from him. One interesting letter was from a father begging him, no matter what the cost, to take his son as a medical student. So it's a very interesting look at his life. And this was his early communal activity in Fustat. He was an outsider, even though he became the leader of that community. And his first major public action was helping to raise money to redeem Jews who were captured by the Crusades. The ransom that was very high, it was 100 gold pieces for every 3 Jews. And he spent a lot of effort collecting the money and administrating it. And then he also married into a prominent local family. And we think that those two things probably propelled him to become head of the community, even as an outsider. This is a Mishnah Torah as written by Maimonides' hand, his draft. And I've seen comments that say that he had the handwriting of a doctor. Some things don't change. And this is a copy of his draft in his hand of the Guide to the Perplexed. So what we found in the Geniza is fairly remarkable. Okay, we also have the last letter that he received from his brother David. Yeah, Martin, why don't you read that one?
Sure. Now, despite all of this, do not worry. He who saved me from the desert with it will save me while on the sea. And please calm the heart of the little one and her sister. Do not frighten them and let them not despair, for crying to God for what is past is a vain prayer. I'm doing all of this out of my continuous efforts for your material well-being, although you have never imposed upon me anything of the kind. So be steadfast. God will replace your losses and bring me back to you. Anyhow, what has passed is past, and I'm sure this letter will reach you at a time when I, God willing, shall have already made most of the way. But the counsel of God alone will stand. Our departure will probably be around the middle of Ramadan. I shall tell this to his uncle, and also that he is fine. Abraham is fine. Please regard to you, Boo. Ali and his brother, to the elder Boo Mansour and his brothers, to my sisters and boys, to all our friends, to the freedman and Mahasin. Written on the 22nd of Iyar, while the express caravan is on the point of leaving.
This turned out to be the very last communication the Rambam actually received from his beloved brother David. And it really devastated him because David was lost at sea, as was all their cargo and whatever funds that he carried. He left him extremely depressed and then also in need of being able to support David's family as well as his own. And you can see just how bad he felt from this letter from Rambam to Rabbi Yafat ben Eliyahu, his friend, that he wrote 8 years after David's death. Etta, would you read that one? Sorry.
Unmute.
Wrong button.
That was the video that you pressed on. Press on the.
Here we go. Okay,
Ah,
you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
8 years after David's death, the greatest misfortune that has befallen me during my entire life, worse than anything else, was the demise of the saint, blank, who drowned in the Indian Sea, carrying much money belonging to me, to him, and to others, and left me a little daughter and a widow. On the day I received that terrible news, I fell ill and remained in bed for about a year, suffering from a sore boil, fever and depression, and was almost given up. About 8 years have since passed, but I am still mourning and unable to accept consolation. And how should I console myself? He grew up on my knees. He was my brother. He was my student. He traded on the market and earned, and I could safely sit at home. He was well versed in Talmud and the Bible and knew Hebrew grammar well, and my joy in life was to look at him. Now, all joy is gone. He has passed away and left me disturbed in my mind in a foreign country. Whenever I see his handwriting or one of his letters, my heart turns upside down and my grief awakens again. In short, I shall go down to the netherworld to my son in mourning.
So you can see he was extremely devastated by David's loss, even to the point that this was written 8 years afterwards. And another light of Jewish history that we find in the Geniza is Yehuda HaLevi, who we know was headed to the Holy Land. And there are more than 1,000 fragments that give us additional poetry and tell of his life when he stopped in Fustat and his death, because we really weren't sure exactly how he died. Let's see. Ta-da. Yeah.
Sarah, he wrote, my heart is in the east and I am in the furthest west.
Right.
This is when he was, I guess, still in Spain, I think.
He did.
So
Right.
this long journey trying to get, do you know if he actually got to the Holy Land ever?
Yes, that's what we have learned. He set off for the Holy Land, but he stopped in Fustat. Actually, he stopped in Egypt in 1141, and he stayed in Egypt for several months. Apparently, he enjoyed himself so much there that people wondered if he actually did leave. And because he went to many parties, he was a guest of honor everywhere. He penned poetry. Winter storms kept him from actually sailing out to the Holy Land. So we didn't know as to if he got there and where he died. But in 1975, Shlomo Dov Gotein, who we'll talk about next time, found a fragment that said he departed Alexandria on May 14th, 1141. So that would have been a trip to the Holy Land that would have been about 10 days, and that would have given him at least a month to actually be successful in his quest before he died. We found a lot of letters written to him, his poetry, and letters written to his acquaintances. We found an anthology of his poetry. A lot of letters were to and from his friend Chalfon, who he also wrote to about the Kuzari, why he wrote the Kuzari. He said he did it to answer a Karaite philosopher, but later he repudiated his work, but he did finish it. And I went ahead and copied in here some of what Goitain wrote about him because I thought it was pretty good. I have it on 2 slides. So Jeff, would you start it?
The Geniza provides us with plenty of information about practically every person or subject matter mentioned or referred to in the numerous poems and poetical letters composed by him during that period. Halevi's biographers have indeed been puzzled by the wealth of materials stemming from this time, and in particular by its character, for it contains many gay and worldly verses, which seem to be in contrast with the mood of a pilgrim to the Holy Land. Far-reaching conclusions have been drawn from this fact with regard to the duration and character of the poet's stay in the land of the Nile. Judah Halevi arrived in Alexandria on board of the Sultan's new ship on the morning of Sunday, the 24th of Elul, which corresponds to the 8th of September, 1140. While the accompanying ship, that of the Qaid or commander, had arrived in time, the ship in which our poet traveled was overdue already on Elul the 12th. After the trials of such a long and dangerous journey, rest was imperative. In addition, seafaring time had drawn to its end. One definitely did not travel in wintertime from Alexandria to Accra, Palestine. This is the best borne out by the fact that
That's okay.
this is the best borne out by the fact that he did not move on to Cairo, where Haifon and others of his friends lived, but stayed in Alexandria 3 full months. Only around Hanukkah, December 1140, he was fetched to the capital by Haifon personally and stayed there until after Passover, March 1141. He was back in Alexandria in time to board a ship for Palestine on Thursday, May 8th, but owing to unfavorable winds, the ship was still in the port on Sunday, the 11th. It is, however, interesting to note that before boarding his ship, the poet left for his relative Judah ibn Ezra, who was expected to follow him, a strongly worded message that he should not go up to Cairo, but proceed from Alexandria to Palestine direct. The greatest tribulation was endured, however, by the poet from his friends. The notables of Alexandria vied with each other in playing host to the distinguished visitor, and one with the family name Ibn Matrul used even his influence on the superintendent of police to get him for a Friday night. Halfon's business friend, Abthi Nasser, from whom we know this and other details, writes that he himself did not ask the poet to his house in order not to embarrass him, but took his own dinner along with every evening to Judah Halevi's place in order to share his distinguished company.
So you can see he was quite the celebrity there. And I think that's probably why he ended up, well, I mean, there was a weather issue too, but that's probably why he told his relative to don't mess with these people. Luisa, would you like to finish?
Sure. We can safely assume that many others did the same, as could be concluded from a number of Halevi's poems, and as we learn expressly from 2 letters, he spent most of the holidays and the Sabbaths in the house of the Dayan, the chief justice of the Jewish community in Alexandria, Aaron ibn al-Amdni, who was himself a scholar and a poet, in addition to earning his livelihood as a prosperous physician. Ibn al-Amadni, whose family had come to Egypt from Amman in Transjordan a few generations before, represented the Palestinian tradition of scholarship and poetry, and he and his 5 sons did all they could to make Halevi's involuntary stay in Alexandria as joyful as possible. Halevi reciprocated by dedicating to the Dayan and his entourage numerous verses, many of which certainly were improvised and meant only as an act of courtesy. However, after the poet had left for Cairo, he flattered Chief Justice, collected and published these poems. The flattered Chief Justice collected and published these poems, which gave rise to misgivings in 2 directions. Those who had not been honored by a poem felt slighted, while in general, the light and sometimes even joking vein in many of these poems was held by some as improper for a Talib Hajj, a man on a holy pilgrimage. The letter to Halevi implies that the poet would disapprove of the Dayan's action. We, however, have to be grateful to Ibn al-Amdni for his collection, which is now in our hands. Gives us a good idea how in those times, each and every facet of social life, including such a trifle as a present of chickens, was echoed in verses. No doubt, the Dayan's example was followed by other Egyptian notables who were eulogized by Halevi. This and nothing else is, to my mind, the reason we have from Halevi's comparatively short stay in Egypt so many poems of the social type.
Yeah, so he was in Egypt for just a very short time, but we have a wealth of material because obviously he was being entertained to pieces. And finally, this is the oldest piece of sheet music known in Hebrew.
Wow.
And it is believed to date between 1100 and 1150. Researchers were really puzzled by it because the script is written in a style used in Babylon, not in Egypt. But it was on paper known to be used in Cairo. But the musical notation is from 12th century Lombardy, northern Italy, that's used only in Gregorian chants. So this document was Egyptian, Jewish, and written in Babylonian Hebrew with Christian sheet music and Italian notes.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys, some of you know about this guy. He was fascinating. So research found that it was produced by a really interesting character who also left fragments of a memoir and a prayer book in the Geniza. His name was Giovan or Johannes from Oppido Lucano, which was 85 miles away from Naples. And he was born into a noble Norman family. He was in a monastery, a priest or a monk, when during the Crusades, he decided he needed to convert to Judaism in 1102, which is pretty phenomenal. I mean, if you consider that Jews were being killed in a crazy manner all over Europe during the Crusades, and it was a capital offense to convert, for a Christian to convert to Judaism. He took the name Ovadia Hager, which we've translated as Ovadia the proselyte. And because it was a capital offense, he fled to Aleppo and then Baghdad. But the local Muslims did not know what to make of this guy, so they wanted to kill him. But the Jewish community in Baghdad welcomed him, and he studied Hebrew and Torah with the schoolboys. In 1119, he moved to Damascus, and then around Palestine and Tyre, sometime in the early 1120s, he ended up in Fustat. And in the Geniza, we found parts of his memoir, 7 folios or 14 pages, 3 musical compositions, a Siddur, 1 folio of the introduction and a single prayer, an epistle of Rabbi Baruch of Aleppo, 1 folio of a lengthy text. And from the Siddur, we've here, Siddur of Obadiah the proselyte. Obadiah, the Norman proselyte, who entered the covenant of the God of Israel in the month of Elul, the year 1413, of the era of the documents, which is 1102, which is 4862 of the era of creation. He, Obadiah the proselyte, has written this prayer book with his own hand. So apparently it was his personal prayer book. And what I've got here is one of his translation of one of his, the piyut that you saw on the previous page, which was an ode to Moses. And as a treat, because we do have time, it's actually been recomposed and played in modern times, so you can find it on YouTube by this group, Mizmor LeDavid. And you can see the Gregorian chant nature of it.
Amazing.
The rest is musical, but it's pretty amazing that this is actually the oldest piece of Hebrew music. If you had just heard it, you might not have realized it was in Hebrew if you understood the words. Because it sure sounded like a Gregorian chant to me.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. This was sort of an overview of some of the highlights that have been found in the Geniza. There's so much information. I mean, people have been working on this for well over 100 years, as we know. And it would I mean, any one of these areas probably could be a full dissertation and maybe even a many-hour class. So those are some of the highlights. If there are any questions, I can try to answer them.
I'm interested in how much access there is to the Geniza. There's some in Cambridge, and then there's a big chunk of JTS. And this
Yeah.
year, the chunk of JTS is
Can
being
you
fixed.
turn down the music? It's
Sure,
hard to
I'll
hear.
stop it.
Yeah.
But my question is, with the ability to photograph and or put it online and so forth, has the study of the Geniza greatly expanded compared to just the people who could get it that had access to JTS or Cambridge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I was going to talk about it the last session.
Mhm.
Maybe I can do it next time if you want. But there have been very amazing projects, and I believe all of it is digitized now. Some of the images that I found online from the Friedberg Geniza project or from the Cambridge Library. Or from
Because
the
the same thing
Penn.
happened with the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, they held it close in a very restricted academic community for decades.
Well, if you think about it, which again I will go into later, is that you have fragments of documents over 70 countries, 70 different libraries, some private, some, most of them not. And, a document, if you want to complete the page, half of it might be in Oxford and half of it might be in Hungary. So there's been a lot of work on joins, which I will present next time, or this last session. Yes. Lisa?
Yes, I wanted to make a comment about Judah Levy's poetry and the likeness that he was apparently accused of. Actually, when he was in Cordoba, his first writings, according to what I've read, are really reflecting a lot of likeness that was going on in that type of poetry, because he was really in good company with the Arab poetry at the time, and they would write about very mundane subjects. And then he began to write a couple of lines in old, what became Proto-Spanish, so to speak. And actually, from the point of view of Spanish literature, Yehuda Levy is very famous for that, for the last two lines that he added in the Romance language, as they were calling Spanish at the time, and they're called the jarchas. So he's considered the giant of Spanish literature for that reason. So that is the period that comes before his Zionist longing. And from then on, he became a different person, and he began to think of Zion, and of course that preceded this trip, I think.
Yeah.
But while he was in Spain, for the most part, his writing was pretty light. He would write about birds, about sometimes comments about a girl or a young woman, or wine, as they did. And then he began to be much more introspective, and he really changed.
Yeah, and he was very well known. I think he was also a physician, wasn't he? And yeah, very popular. And I was reading one document that Maimonides wrote as a court physician. He would rise very early in the morning and work nonstop at the court with people who needed to be seen. He'd come back to Fustat famished, and he'd find that the courtyard of his house was absolutely full of people who wanted to see him for something else. Basically, barely have time to eat. And that would be the only meal he had all day before he had to go back to work on these other people.
Yeah, I read, it's a long letter. I think it's called the letter to, I don't remember whom, but it's such a beautiful document.
Yeah, so basically the life of a court physician wasn't easy. Apparently Jewish doctors were in demand. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Sue.
You may have covered this in the first one from this. it's very wonderful that they're able to isolate documents like by Yehuda Halevi and by Maimonides. But is there any evidence that there were communities who sent whatever they had in their Geniza to the Cairo Geniza just to get rid of it? And that is the majority of what is there?
No, I don't believe they have any way of knowing that, but they do have a lot of data from a lot of letters and other documents that came from Italy, from Tunisia, not so many from Syria as you might expect, because that area, Fustat, was a central area for commerce. And so there was a lot from other countries.
Oh, okay.
And Ben Ezra was a Palestinian synagogue. Behind me, my backdrop today is actually what some of the biblical fragments looked like before they were processed. So you can see that when Schechter said that it was a mess, it was a mess. So the fact that we have documents out of it is fairly, and especially considering that many of them were processed very early on, before conservancy was as advanced as it is now, it's pretty remarkable.
Mhm. This was a great talk again, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I wanted to do more detail, but we went broad. Next time I was planning, I could talk about the current state of the Geniza, or the other thing I wanted to talk about was Goitein's work, which talk about the lifestyle, the Mediterranean lifestyle. He wrote 5 volumes called The Mediterranean Lifestyle.
Thank you in particular for the music. That was just amazing, because it was music of all the places and times that you talked about. And I certainly didn't think about it. And just thank you for everything.
Quite welcome. Yeah, I thought that
demonstrates that Jewish music is derived from the music of the culture around it.
Yes,
Everywhere.
definitely.
Right?
So is the art.
But it also shows that we get a lot
That was the thing.
who've chosen to be part of our tribe.
Mm.
They have a lot of input that is very helpful.
Now, I was saying that we've been to a number of lectures at JTS, and this woman from Princeton who has pieces of the collection right now, and your stuff. There's no end because there's no overlap.
Oh, good.
5 lectures on the Cairo Geniza, and there's no overlap so far.
I know I have all these books and papers on my desk and a cat that wants to hold them all down. And I'm trying to put together a presentation, and it's like, what book did I read that in? What document was that in? It's just
It's hard.
Sarah, I think you should do your next talk on what you plan to do your next talk on, in the order that's reasonable, that's logical for you.
Well, that's why it was going to be, yeah.
Okay, don't let anybody derail you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Super.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Sarah.
great.
Wonderful.
And I assume you're back, so welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm back.
Yep.
Anybody else has a German idea of what they'd like to do a 4-part series on after Sarah's done? Let me know.
Martin, I sent you a note about that
Oh, good.
I will follow and do something, but it can't be the next one.
Okay, good.
Hey, Martin, I'm going to be working on something, maybe if Cage accepts it, on contemporary visual midrash.
Yeah, let's talk
So,
one-on-one.
when I get it worked out, there'll be a lot of information. It would easily do 4 weeks. You'll be looking at a lot of art and artists, but
Super. Variety is good for us.
yeah. So that would be there. I'm going to do like 2 90-minute sessions, one where they'll be doing hands-on, but we could easily fill sessions because I'm learning more and more contemporary artists as part of the Jewish Art Salon. They have talks on Tuesdays that from, so it's yeah.
Super. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Everybody, Shabbat Shalom. And once again,
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you guys for your inputs. Bye.
Sorry, I couldn't get on it first. I must have typed it wrong.